I've finally been reading through the Amplio books, and so my question is, I was wondering if we could just talk about it, and I'd love to hear you kind of expound a little bit, Al,
Sure.
on the idea of Amplio and complexity. And
Okay.
so, for just to kind of set it up, so I have for a long time kind of been a fan of the Cynefin model, and I know that you haven't been.
Right.
And I've never quite understood why
Right.
until today, I think, in the section on like page 149, 150 of the Amplio development book, where you talk about, you know, it doesn't help to try to lock yourself into being in one domain or another, because every every situation has aspects of all the domains.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you could just say a little bit more on that,
Sure.
and then maybe we could discuss.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I understand, and there are actually three different models you could take. So one model is there is a recognition that things can be simple, complicated, complex, or chaotic, and then discord or whatever he calls it now.
Mhm.
And you could talk about transitioning from one domain to the next. But first of all, that presumes a couple of things. The weather is complex no matter how you look at it. And some things may appear complex, and then you change your view of it, and they're no longer complex. So you first of all have to pay attention to, and I think he's trying to start talking about this now with his equestrian or whatever you call it, that you have to look to see how are you changing your view of things. When you say things are complex, usually that also means you can't solve them. I have solved problems or been involved in projects that solve problems that very, very smart people said were impossible to solve. So I don't like being told I can't solve something, and I have evidence to show that it's not effective to do it. And sometimes I was the leader. The more interesting ones, I was just the grunt Fortran programmer, but I was there observing somebody solve something that at the time was the most complicated problem, complex problem ever done by a computer. So well, that was pretty interesting. It predated neural nets. This was back in the mid 70s, late 70s. So I don't like saying that. But here's the other thing. There are two or three other things. Why are you even bothering with this? I mean, seriously, what's the reason? Well, because I need to know if what I'm saying to do or trying to do is going to work or not. Oh, well, just look at VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That'll tell you that. Read Art of Action. Hell, read the 12-page summary, Jim Trott's Art of Action, and you will discover very quickly that you should have experienced that there's friction. Communication doesn't work well. We always have problems. So I can tell that things aren't going to work straight. Anyway, even in simple environments. Why? Because if you've got a person involved, it's not simple. The person is complex. Environments are complex. If people are involved, it's a complex environment. End of story. Even in a manufacturing line, it's complex. So now you're saying, crap, everything's complex. What's my real problem I'm trying to do? I'm trying to be more efficient. Efficiency, by the way, is not the cost. The efficiency, how much value divided by the effort. That is actually the definition. That's also the right way to look at it. So if you're doing the wrong thing very quickly, that's not efficient at all. It's inefficient. You got no value. It's doing the right thing with less effort. So let's look at that. If I'm trying to be efficient, working on the right thing with less effort, what's the problem in doing that with knowledge work? It's non-linearity. It's non-linear events. Just take a look. Look in your own experience. How many times somebody didn't show up for a meeting, that person was critical, they didn't say something they needed to say, everybody else went off on a tangent. Small change, huge impact. Oh, if you're a programmer, a one-off error. Man, I can't tell you how many days, months on one code I spent on a one-off error. Man, it doesn't get any simpler change than that. Scheduling. Somebody isn't available because you overran the schedule and now it impacts. A slight misunderstanding. Oh, you ever hear of meters and whatever our metric system is, our meter system is causing an error? I mean, billions of dollars get lost on these tiny errors. You know what? Nonlinearity is not even mentioned in Cynefin. Not mentioned. Chaotic events and chaos are two different things. Chaos is a state. Chaotic event, that's another name for a nonlinear event. So Cynefin doesn't even mention the most critical factor that causes waste and is the biggest problem we have. So I don't like it just for that reason. Now, the best book on chaos theory, by the way, not the best movie. It's not. There's an adventure movie I liked a lot called Jurassic Park. And then there's a book on chaos theory called Jurassic Park. These are two different things. They just both have dinosaurs in them. I'm not kidding, by the way. If you're a programmer and you read Jurassic Park, there is a scene. I won't tell you what it is. I remember at the scene, and that's not in the. It's sort of in the movie, but not. I literally, when I read it, I gasped, couldn't breathe, and had to put the book down. I'm not kidding. I had such a physical reaction because one little tiny thing that somebody forgot caused all the destruction of the island. And I remember a time, one little error, I wiped out my client's data. I'm not kidding. We had to rebuild the whole sucker. If you're a consultant, that's a bad move, by the way. Just a tip. I told you I'd help you with your consulting business. Cleaning out all your clients' data is not a good way to go. They don't like it.
I'll write that down.
I can still remember that. I remember when I realized it was not going to recover. I thought I could recover it when I realized I couldn't. I remember some woman in the back. I was like, Alan looks like he's about to cry. I remember saying that. And I was holding it back. I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? So it was a long time ago. So what do you have to do? What does complexity mean? Well, if you look at ACOS view, that it's about the relationships between things. And if you look at Goldratt's view, that at the core, there are things that govern cause and effect. Now, he doesn't say we can see them. I thought he said that when I read it the first time, but then he never says we can see them. He just says they're there. In fact, he explicitly says we can't see them because when we try something, we don't expect it's going to work necessarily. He says only a fool expects a prototype to work because there's so many unknowns. He says that. What we don't see are those relationships that are complex. So yeah, it's worth knowing complexity, but instead of looking at what domain you're in, which we know we're in a complex, various complexity. Some is complex, some simple, some's this, some's that. When I have a complex relationship, and this clicked for me when I read the book Meltdown, and he talked about 3 Mile Island. What happened there was you had a sequence of nonlinear events occurring because there was coupling and there was no way to see what was going on, lack of feedback. So what did this tell me when I realized that? What I need to do is prevent nonlinear events. And the way I prevent nonlinear events is I create feedback because it might be going like this, but if I could catch it here, it's not bad yet. It could be about to be a nonlinear event, but I catch it before it goes up the curve and I decouple things. So I don't cause a nonlinear event by pushing work on you. See, that's coupling. I think something and you got to do it instead of you pulling the work. So I create visibility, I decouple, and now I'll find where I'm wrong. And what I know is a lot of what I know is right, and some things I don't know. So when I try something, I know I got to validate it. And now I know, I didn't see that relationship that this person was needed over there, and I pulled them over there and I caused a problem. Okay, now I know. So the intention of Cynefin is not matching what we need to be doing. Now, think about it another way. Forget all this theory. Forget all that theory. Forget everything I just said. There's another compelling reason. Think of complexity in 5 levels. The top level, no, I don't want to go top level. I'm going to just 5 levels, but which one's top, which one's bottom, I don't know. So in the list, one of them is, how do I do my work? How complex is my workflow? Then the other one is, well, how hard is it for me to convince somebody else that it's a good idea? Like my manager may not see it. That's complex because he's got all these other things. What about the product I'm building? How hard is it to build a product? See, this is where Scrum again mixes up. They're trying to create a simple system because they think you need that and discover what the customer needs. No, discovering what the customer needs is complex, but our system shouldn't be complex. It should be straightforward. It should fill in the blanks. It can be complicated. It could even be complicated if it helps us all the time.
It
So
could be intuitive like the iPad.
it could be intuitive eventually. Yeah. Well, the product, yeah. But how do you discover that? Actually, you do that by looking at the customer journey, human-centered design. But the point is there's a difference in the complexity of the system you're using and the complexity of the system you're building. So we have the way we work, convincing others of how to work, the product, the market the product is in, and the world as a whole. Now, each of those has different levels of complexity, and each of those has different degrees of what we can control. But what do we need to do in all 5 of those? Sorry, I had lunch. I've got a knife here. What do we need to do in each of those when we get surprised? We need to pivot. Right? We need to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
So if we forget the theory and just say, well, what does he need to do? Being pragmatic, but I agree with all this, just making fun of y'all. But true, we got to figure out a better word. I totally agree. You need to pivot. Well, then how do you pivot? You need quick feedback so you can see something's going wrong. You have to not have things coupled so you don't start something and have it cause other problems. Oh my goodness, what did I just say a minute ago? You need to have visibility, you need with feedback, you need to decouple. So my approach is geared from the behavior we want, whereas Snowden's approach is geared from this mental model system he's created in his head. Well, how many times have we said you don't design good things by just designing from your head? I'm designing from the behavior people need to have. And what you get is this middle ground that no matter what you do, I want feedback. I want the ability to pivot. So the question is, how do you get the ability to pivot? And here's the other thing. See, it doesn't really matter if it's complex or not. You still want the ability to pivot. Why study how much complexity there is?
You have to have an openness to you.
That's right.
It's like aircraft accident investigation. Who cares? It very complex, but when you get down to it, it's never a single thing. It's a series.
It's amazing.
Yeah. My favorite class ever. Anyway.
Yeah, no, this is an interesting point because see, it's easy to get. One of my favorite television series is called Seconds from Disaster. And they take a lot of the well-known disasters and they walk through them and they show how they're never a series of a simple thing. There are lots of things interacting. The Titanic sank for a variety of reasons. Now, underneath it all was because of the attitude it couldn't sink. I mean, if they didn't have that attitude, it wouldn't have sunk. But they made a lot of decisions so the context you're thinking has a big impact. The Concorde disaster was 3 or 4 things happened in a freakish way that caused it to catch on fire. The
L1011 into the Everglades.
Yeah, and it's like amazing. It's amazing how all these and what is that? Deepwater Horizon. I mean, all of them. One time there was it was one of the other platforms that in the Arctic Sea that literally caught fire, and this is where the burning platform comes from because somebody left their wetsuit. One of the divers left their wetsuit on a walkway where they had designed it so if there was an oil leak or something and it came out, it would fall down off the walkway. It had the grill, you got those metal grills, things, but somebody put their wetsuit on top of it. And it didn't fall down and oil accumulated. And when a fire broke out, that exploded. And then that caused the whole thing to go up. You can't figure this stuff out. You can't figure this stuff out. I know you can't figure this stuff out. You can never figure this stuff out. Something as simple as a walkway and somebody taking their wetsuit off causing a massive disaster. You're never going to figure this stuff out. And what you solve is how you get feedback on things. Now, in the physical world, this is almost impossible. So you have disasters. In knowledge work, it's not impossible. And this discussion that's out there about complexity takes your eye off the ball, in my opinion.
All I know is I don't give a rip. I'm just trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, well, there's a pragmatic effect, and we do need to get a better word. But Mike, does that answer it?
It does. It does. It's just, I think whether we call it pragmatic or whatever we call it, I think in the end, we are just trying to solve problems.